Center Circle podcast. Larry Weaver and Andre Bomar with you tonight. And this is going to be a pretty quick one today because we're just going to talk about a few things that happened from over the weekend. Dre, ready to rock and roll?
I am ready to go. Got a week under our belt, and let's see what we can talk about here.
All right, we'll talk about topic number one, that being the first week of the Premier Division, and was a bit interesting than what we were expecting, to say the least, Dre. We'll go ahead and take a look at the results. You can see that the match that I was able to cover for us, Soccer Saves Lives for Atlanta City 2, pretty much what I was expecting in this match, Dre. SSL to come out on top against Atlanta City. Joao, still working through the pieces and puzzles of getting Atlanta City down to a more cohesive and functioning club.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I actually expected Atlanta City to do a little bit better in this game. I've seen a lot of the offseason prep that Coach Joao has done at Atlanta City. SSL coming in from Division One. I felt like there was a step for them to take to get up to the next level. Although they are a Kalanji Academy team, which means they have a lot of resources, talent that they can pull from. But it's just that I think the experience level of SSL still eclipses what Atlanta City had to offer. And I think there's still some building that Coach Joao needs to do with that team to get them to the level they need to be at. So yeah, but I do think that both of these teams, I don't think there's any danger of them, competing for the title of the division. They're both, building to get some security in the division. But I do think they need to watch out for the relegation race. They don't want to get pulled down into that. And watching it, it's the first week, but watching it, it still seemed that both of them are going to struggle this season. And it's just it remains to be seen. But I think that they have a lot of work to do with the type of talent and the type of quality we have in the Premier. They got their work cut out for them.
Yeah, two teams that should focus on the middle of the road of the table, and if anything comes out above that, then it's a success.
Yes.
So then we look at match number two from Saturday. Birmingham falls to Vinotinto yet again, 3-2. And like we were talking about off air, Vinotinto has just had Birmingham's number over the course of the last few seasons. I don't know what it is, but it seems like every time Vinotinto goes to Birmingham, they somehow find a way to get a victory.
Yeah, it seems to be a mentality thing. This is almost an unexpected rivalry that's occurred between these two teams, and Vino Tinto seems to have FC Birmingham's number. There seems to be a mental block when it comes to FC Birmingham, and it surprises me because Coach Goldfarb is one of the better coaches for preparing his team mentally for matches like this. But it didn't appear to be so in this case, and it looked like from the result. I mean, the score, I think it was a little bit closer than what occurred on the field. I think Vino Tinto surprised everyone because I still think that they are going to struggle through this season. I still thought that FC Birmingham, and I still think that they will, make the playoffs and challenge for a division playoff title. But it was a poor start from FC Birmingham, and I don't know if it's just the idea that Vinotinto matches up well against them, or it's just early in the season and they still need to work on some of that cohesiveness between the players getting into the season. But they have a problem. They're going to have to solve it fast to really be in contention because with all the quality above them in the division, dropping points even at this stage of the season and can really do damage to your campaign for honors.
Yeah, when we talk about Sunday's matches, we had four matches on Sunday, and the surprise for me has to be Potros versus North Georgia. Potros pulling off a 4-3 victory over North Georgia. That one really surprised me. That was a good battle between the teams, back and forth, scoring goals. and I was really shocked to see Potros come out on top on that one, coming back into the league and pulling off a solid win over one of the solid teams from Premier in the Northwest region, being North Georgia. It's impressive for Potros.
Yeah, Larry, I think that this was one of those ones I didn't know about. How to look at this when the game occurred. Potros, even before they came back, they took a season off. Always a well-oiled team, maybe not the best talent compared to some of the other teams that are in there. Not the best experience, but a very well-run club. North Georgia, also well run, good talent, but we got to remember they lost Sean McKeever and Alerte to Pro Profile this season. That the bulk of their attack, and I expected them to struggle with the attack, but they jumped to a 3-1 lead in the first half, largely off of some pretty good approach play and good finishing, but they really suffered in the second half defensively. The goals that came back against them were defensive errors, and Potros took good advantage of that, and first equalized, and then went ahead with a brilliant free kick from Benjamin Oranga late in the match, and that was all. That was the difference. But watching this game, I'm a little bit afraid for North Georgia because although they scored well in the first half, they didn't seem to have that edge offensively, and defensively they are sort of in disarray right now. So I think there's a lot to be asked of them. Potros, on the other hand, going down 3-1 in the first half, coming back to equalize and then go ahead and win that game shows a lot of heart. And so that's going to go well for them in the season, and especially in a division like this, so that anybody that they play, they're going to have to play a full 90 minutes against them to do well. So it was a good result for Potros. I think it's a worrying result for North Georgia.
Yeah, something that they're going to have to quickly turn the switch back on and be ready to go this weekend. Some of the other results that we had from this first week, we had UMA taking on the powerhouse Atlanta United Academy and a 3-0 victory for Atlanta United. That's pretty much what we both expected in that match. When
Yeah,
we talked, you were talking about Dalton and Kalanji with a 3-1 win. Pretty much what we expected there as well. And then finally, the match that we covered on Sunday, something that we rarely get to see, the word suspended. That
yeah,
Mother Nature decided that today was not the day that that match needed to complete, and we ended the day at half 1-1 between Rovers and Legends. So let's
yeah.
start with the first one. Let's talk about the Atlanta United versus UMA. Like I said, pretty much the verdict that we expected to see between them. UMA first season coming in the Premier, going against the powerhouse that is Atlanta United. A lot of teams in this position, they fall simply because of the stripes on the shirt more than the play on the field. We also know that Coach Andrews dealing with the fact that he doesn't have his full squad that he had in Division One. So it's going to be a challenge for UMA throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last week with Atlanta United. They lost a lot of players to college, so there's a whole new crop of guys coming in. I mean, there are three scorers that Pavel Romero, Matt Dijani, and then there was, of course, an own goal that finished out the scoring for them. And it's hard to know when you've never seen these guys play how well they'll play. But like Steven said last week, it's Atlanta United, and they're not going to put anybody in the bars jersey that isn't top notch. They got the pick of the cream of the crop in the state, and so it's going to be quality out there. UMA, like you said before, they lost a lot of guys to college. The team that basically won the division going away, Division One going away last season, they're largely gone. And so he's got basically an academy team out there, a U19 team. But they're a strong U19 team. It's a team that's played together for a while. They should do well this season. Not really looking for them to challenge for any honors, but they held as well as they could against a team like Atlanta United, and like you said, it's not a surprising result, and I think it's a good start for Atlanta United.
Yeah, and then you look at like you were talking about when it came to the Dalton Kalanji. Kalanji, you said played that match with 9 men.
Yeah, we discussed this off air, and I was saying that I've had my discussions with Coach Bruno, the owner of Kalanji Academy, and they had voiced that they're going to really focus on the UPSL this season, and put all their resources into it. They were not happy with the way the season went last season, and I felt like if they did do that, no one could touch them because I think they pound for pound they have the best talent in the division, but it doesn't do them any good if they don't utilize that talent in the UPSL. And they were missing a lot of players because, much like last season, they had divided their attention with other leagues, with other competitions, and that's where a lot of the bulk of their players were. And it cost them because it's a game against the defending champions in the division, and you bring 9 players. And so, one of them is, Sean McKeever, who scored their only goal in the game. He's a standout player from North Georgia last season, now with Kalanji. But it's not enough against a team like Dalton. Yeah, you scored first and you held out for a long time, but you're not going to go far with an effort like that in the UPSL. And so until they turn around and focus their attention on it, I think this opens the door for a lot of other teams to, excel and get past them really. So I think kudos to Dalton for finishing, the season much like, or starting the season much like they finished it last season. And it's a good start for them, but a poor start for Kalanji per profile.
Yeah, because in my mind, at the end of the day, Dalton, if you want to dethrone him, you're going to have to beat him. And that showing by Kalanji wasn't enough. They need to do better. Now, when it comes to the Rovers and Legends match, it ended 1-1. Rovers conceded the first goal in about the 31st minute. About the 45th minute, they came back and scored their tying goal before Mother Nature took over. But the one thing that we got out of that first 45 was Legends looked like a much more complete team in that first 45.
Yeah, I mean they have some players that were standouts last season for them, or steady players from last season that have seemed to have improved this season. But I think the overall improvement that I've seen is just their team play. They were much more cohesive on the defensive side. In the attack, they kept really Rovers honest throughout the the minutes that they were able to get done in this game. And I think it's a good indicator that Legends is serious about trying to pick on that playoff spot for this season. And they've done a lot of things in the off season, coaching wise and with personnel, to really focus on trying to improve and get there. So I think that they're safely mid table. I don't think that from what I saw yesterday, I don't think there's gonna be the worry that like they had last season about fighting against relegation. And Rovers, Rovers were Rovers. I think that they're still recovering from the disaster last season. They got to build that teamwork again, but they looked competent in the game or this past weekend. And so, but I think they, much like UMA, I think they have a long road to go to get back to the prominence that they had in previous seasons.
And then at some point, that second half is going to get rescheduled so that that game can be completed. We'll find out at a later date when that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's gonna resume. They did finish the Lightning happened at halftime, and
Yeah,
so they got
right at the whistle.
right at the whistle. It was 1-1, and that's where it'll pick up. So they'll play a 45-minute half. It'll be at Rovers, either Tara Stadium or there again at Steel Road Stadium. I'm not sure which one. They'll make those plans. It might be a midweek reschedule. But we should find out this coming week when they reschedule that. It'll be pretty soon, I think.
And then if we look at the table for the first week, we can see that Atlanta City on or Atlanta United Academy on top, as we usually see throughout a regular season. 3 points. SSL, Dalton, Potros, Vinotinto, all with wins. So all five of those teams sitting with 3 points. It's only goal differential that really separates those teams. So we'll wait to see as the weeks go on. We'll see where these land. Los Tigres, they were the only team that had a bye this first week, with us having 13 teams in the division this season.
Yeah, I mean it's still early doors now, and there's a lot of shuffling I think that's gonna take place. We're gonna see some familiar names floating back to the top of the table, and some familiar names floating down there. But I think from top to bottom, it's a very competitive division, and yeah, I'm anxious to see Los Tigres and see what they can do. Club the strongest. In their matches coming up this coming week in the season, that's a team I think is ready to or needs to be ready to challenge for the division now, especially with the pressure they have from their parent club down in Bolivia. I think they're expecting championship results, and it'll be interesting to see if they can provide that or not. They've got a big test coming up, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, because we talked about it last week. Their parent club, they did make the playoffs last season, but their parent club doesn't want them to just make the playoffs. They want them to go deep in the playoffs, if not win the playoffs. So, the Sandoval's, they've got some work to do over there.
Yeah, I mean it's a really competent branding that they have there because the strongest in Bolivia are perennial champions, and so they expect anybody who carries that team crest to do the same. So yeah, there's a bit of pressure there, and they got Atlanta City is a winnable game next weekend, but with that pressure sometimes can come mistakes, and so
Yeah.
we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Hopefully we'll be doing that game.
Definitely so. And then that will bring us over to topic number two. It's going to be an interesting topic: rules. Something that, we didn't have a lot really to cover this week, but I wanted to kind of dig into this a little bit because the fact that we have some teams that are coming into the league in Division 1, new teams, and there's some rules that I don't think that some of these teams and some of these organizations realize exist in the rule book. Especially when we come over and we look at that situation. You look at, slide over here. When it comes to a new team, Rule 1310 says a new team entering the UPSL cannot recruit players from existing team that is located in the same UPSL division in their first season of play without the permission from the existing team to recruit such player or players. Any request to use such players must be made via the UPSL, who will handle the request to the existing team. Otherwise, permission will not be valid. If the permission is denied, that decision is final and will not be reconsidered. We have heard through the grapevine that we had basically a similar an issue with this when it comes to one of the teams that was coming into the league, grabbing some players from a previous team that's still in existence, and that caused a lot of controversy in the weeks building up to to the season.
Yeah, I mean the rule itself is an anti-poaching league rule, and it protects teams that have built and trained players not to lose them easily, because again this is a pro development type of division or league, and it's not a professional league, so the contracts, there aren't contracts with players that bind them for years and years and years. And so, as part of the protection, if you have a new team coming in, they can't come in, make a whole bunch of promises to players and say, hey, we're going to give you this, this, and this if you leave this team and come over to us. And so they've put that rule in to slow that type of thing down. There's still the ability to transfer players, but you have to go through the proper channels. So you have to get permission and then they're released. So these registrations, the registration of these players for a team is last a calendar year, and then after that calendar year, players can opt to move on their own. But until then, they really have to go through the transfer process. And so, and there was a little leeway between the spring and the fall season too, between existing UPSL teams. And so players can do that. And that's really to allow players not to be bound in a situation that's not good for them too. So it's sort of both ways. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. That rule is existing for new teams coming in. Previously not a UPSL team trying to come in, they can't then just go through and grab a whole bunch of players, particularly in the cases you're talking about, one team coming in to grab most of the players from another
Yeah.
team, a single team, and that really has an effect on the competition. So that was dealt with and has been resolved, and so I think this is going to help with the competition for this fall season.
Yeah. And when we talk about that said rule, what you were just talking about, when it talks about postseason, when you look at postseason, the rule states that players are allowed to transfer from one club to another after the end of the season, and that the players are given the window that they need to process that, and that the player needs to submit the $25 transfer fee with the paperwork. The new club receives a notification and is required to accept the transfer. The current club receives a notification that the player is transferring, and then that is automatically conducted between the spring and the summer seasons. And we've seen that before. And as we've talked many times before, full disclosure, I was once a part of Seas United's staff, and this is something that I dealt with multiple times. I took the rules in that very seriously, where if you want to have a player that's moving from one to another, you got to follow these rules. And if you're a player that isn't getting enough time that you feel on the field, this gives you the avenue to move to greener pastures.
Right. I mean, there's a certain kind of balance that has to be there. I mean, you don't want a player languishing at a team where they have no opportunity to really play and get seen, because again, pro development means, you're develop this is a very critical time for players and they can't really sit out. That's why we play year round. And so if you're going to spend an entire year on the bench or in the reserves, or somewhere where you can't really develop as a player, then it's up to that player to have that option to move to a better situation where he can play. And so that's why that optional rule is there, to allow that player to move if need be. So both the team and the player have protections and rights under the law. And so it's there to improve both the teams, the cohesiveness of the teams, but also the ability for the player to develop properly, and get to that next step if he needs to.
And then the last rule I want to look at, because the fact that we are only about a week or so out when it comes to Division One kicking off, that is to know that when you have two teams in both, that a more than one team in UPSL must create entirely separate rosters for each of those teams. Temporary use of the players for the different teams from the different rosters is allowed via temporary transfer, and also with the rule that for clubs having one team competing in the Premier and one team in Division One, they can utilize players from both rosters for check-in, but only up until the date of the roster freeze. So we had some issues, we've had some issues back in the past where we had some teams that tried to just have one roster for both teams and try to think that that was going to be enough for them. But no, if you're going to have a team in Division 1, you're going to have a team in Premier, make sure you have a roster for both teams. Yes, you can bring both of those rosters to the match and you can say these guys are going to play and these guys are going to play, and the league will allow it, the refs will allow it, but you've also got to think about the roster freeze, because what is it, 3 weeks before the end of the season, when that roster freeze kicks in, you need to make sure that who's on that roster is the guys that you want going into the playoffs.
Yeah, the roster freeze happens 18 days before the last scheduled match, and that's the key. Technically, you could, like as you mentioned before, you could have one roster, right, and just use players from both in both the Division One games and Premier games. But that will kill you when the roster freeze happens because at that time the rosters are frozen, and
Yeah,
so both Premier and Division One you're using just the one roster. So if you have one roster and you get to the roster freeze, then in one of the leagues where you don't have a roster, you're going to forfeit the rest of your games. And so, you have to be pragmatic about the use of these players and make sure that you have proper rosters for both, especially at roster freeze. Now, the whole reason for this, again, we're a pro development, type of league. And so if you have a large enough club where you can have multiple teams, then of course you want these players playing as much as possible. And if they're going to be sitting the bench in Premier, they're not really playing and getting that experience and match fitness. So you in a sense you put them on the Division One squad. Now we had a reserve division last season. We may bring that back to some degree, but it was for these second teams for them to play each other. And it was the same sort of thing. But now we have Division One, so we have a mixture of second teams in there as well as individual teams. But on those second teams, maybe you have a player that has been injured that played in Premier and he needs to get back to match fitness. You put him on the Division One team. There's no transfer fee from Premier to Division One. He plays 2 or 3 weeks, gets back to match fitness, then he can be placed back on the Premier Division squad. Or you have some fringe players that can't quite break into that Premier Division team, but they play in Division One, they impress, and then they can win a spot on the Premier Division squad. So it's a part of the development of the club that you have and the players that gives them an opportunity. So it favors the teams that have the larger squads that need to have competitiveness more so than just Premier, and they get in Division One because you're competing against teams that are trying to get promoted. And so, if you have a second team, that second team can't be, even if they win Division One, they can't be promoted to the
yeah,
Premier where their senior team is. Um, but they can win Division One, and so they're competing and trying to get and impress. And so that makes it, intriguing to watch Division One and those developing players and teams trying to get to Premier to be promoted to Premier. So that's kind of how that system works.
yeah. But that also exactly it brings up the point that you just said there, a large roster. We had that incident a couple seasons back when Augusta United had two teams and they basically only had about 20, 22 players and they were literally playing the same 11 guys on both matches in a weekend, and they were basically just grinding these guys out because they were playing so many matches, and that's not what this system is for. It's for a large roster, like you said, guys that are either injured or guys that are working to get up to the next level. They're putting in the work, showing the coach, yes, I'm ready for the big time. It's not just let's get a bunch of games because one, you're spending a ton of money for the matches, and two, you're running these guys to the point to where you're really hampering their career by making them play so many minutes.
Well, it didn't really make sense. I remember the team. I'm not going to name them, but it I didn't see the sense in doing what they did because it's counterproductive to the competition, to your team. Like you say, it's overworking the players, and you're not getting really anything out of it. It's best suited for large squads. If you have 40, 50, 60 players in your club, you can only dress 20 for a game. So you could have 40 players, on a practice squad not getting any time. So you create a second team, and in some cases, like FC Birmingham, you have two, a second and a third team. You have a U19 and a FC Birmingham too, and they've made great use of the system because they basically everybody in their club is getting competitive games every week, and that's what it's for. And
Yeah.
so to take one squad to play in two different divisions is counterproductive for your team. it doesn't really make sense. Plus, like you say, it's an extra expense that could be used in other types of investment in the club. So that didn't go well with them. They didn't finish the season. Ran out of players, had some injuries, came up upon the roster freeze, and it's like they made no plans about what to do when they got to that point. I really don't know what was going through their minds when they joined, but we're doing a lot better job of vetting these teams now, and so those types of situations are discussed, and so there's not going to be the confusion, I think, that we had a few years ago in the Georgia division. We have some very high quality organizations now, and it's getting better and better. So I don't expect to see that sort of thing ever again.
Yeah. Well, and that's the point is UPSL encourages teams to have 40, 50, 60 men on their roster.
Yeah,
And one of the things that you can do, like the situation that UMA is facing, where they have several of their star players going off to college, and we kind of talked about this off air with them. I know I did with some of their staff. You can still put those guys on your roster if they're gone. I mean, at the end of the day, UPSL is one of the cheapest organizations. It's only $37 to register a player on your roster. So you can put a a player that's off to college on your roster, knowing that when it comes time for playoffs, he can be eligible to be able to play. In if both you and the player so deem it that you want to do that. So just because a player is on your roster, sometimes that you don't even have to think about them even playing in a consecutive manner. You're like, yes, he's on the roster. It's that old break glass scenario. We'll
yeah. I
have
mean,
him on the roster just in case.
yeah. I mean, when you register players, I mean, it's a year-round league, and so you have a registration for a player for the entire calendar year. From January to December, both the spring and the fall seasons. There, that is. And so, if you have them, like UMA is a good example, is if you have them registered for the spring season, and now in the fall they've gone to college, there's no reason to take them off of your team. You don't have to take them. You can just leave them on there. You don't know, they might be able to come back even around playoff time and be utilized. And so if you just keep them on their premier division team, you get to the roster freeze, the guys get a break from college, or they just decide that they want to play in the playoffs if you qualify, then it's seamless. They just come in and they rejoin the team. They're already registered for the fall, and you got yourself a powerhouse team for the
Or if
playoffs.
you have an issue where the player is at college and the college coach decides they don't want to play him.
Yeah,
We've seen that issue too. So, those players get an option to play in the UPSL. So there's a
yeah,
lot of avenues. Kalanji is well known for this. Junior Sandoval, he's always on their roster, and he's always away playing in other establishments. And then when it comes time around playoffs, here comes Junior out of nowhere, and he just lights up the goal scoring for Kalanji.
yeah. I think the appealing thing is the flexibility that these players do have and the teams have to use these players. And you know th- like you said, it's encouraged for these teams to build their rosters up. Get 40, 50 players registered and ready to play. Get yourself a couple of teams in there to develop. And I keep saying this, but it's a pro development setup. And so some of these teams come from a recreational background, and it's a bit of an adjustment to come in, because a lot of them, like teams we've had in the past, like Georgia FC and Atlanta Generals and things like that. Atlanta Elephants is a good example. These are tournament teams. These are teams that go around. They play in the Mariachi Cup. They play in these different things for money, but they're not really built to develop talent.
Yeah,
They get mercenary players. They bring them in, and they're good, and they
yeah,
win trophies, but they're not developing players. And
yeah,
so they play their 2 or 3 seasons, they win their honors, they win their money, and then you don't see them anymore.
yeah,
And so what we have now, we have teams like Legends and UMA and North Georgia United, Atlanta United. These are teams that their primary focus is developing players. It's not about just coming in and winning tournaments. And so, you see when you see a high turnaround of, we talked about this last week, high turnaround of talent, players coming in, they do really well. They're not going to stay. They're going to go to the next level. That's success.
Yeah.
So you're turning these things out. It's great to win trophies. I mean, it's multiple things that you're trying to play for. The league, the national, title. We have, a community cup now. We had the regional cup. Lots of things to play for. Promotion. But ultimately, you're trying to set up your players to move on to professional careers, and you're also trying to improve and build your club up to crank these players out. Kalanji's been great at that. I mean, they have put a lot of players in professional ranks, and these different teams are getting to do that now more and more. So yeah, so it's set up for this, and it's up to the teams to take advantage of it, or to just not have the know-how or the resources to do it. You got to learn how to do it and get it done, and you can turn it into something special, especially in this country where this country's talent rich. And so there's a lot of players that can be developed and sent to the next level. Maybe they have to go to the next level in another country, which is fine. It's a world game. But they at least have that avenue now. They have that pathway now.
Yeah, if you want to take a moment and you have some time to spare, go back and look in our archives at some of those Atlanta Elephant matches. There were some just entertaining, stupendous goals that Atlanta Elephants put forth. That one season, they were taking shots from 30, 40 yards out and making some just rockets that were just sensational to cover.
Yeah, I mean, they're the teams that had some real studs on their on their squads. I mean, it's amazing. Like you said, Atlanta Elephants was one of those, and that's a team that had won multiple tournaments before coming in to doing that. FC Matata is another one,
Yeah.
another tournament team that came in, high quality, very entertaining to watch. Have that African style of play, and so it's entertaining, but at the end of the day, they're not here, and
Yeah,
it's
I talked to Coach Hippo at the summit, and it sounds like he's trying to rebuild the team and to get the structure rebuilt so that they can come back into the UPSL. I'd love to see Matata come back in because those guys would put on entertaining matches. They always fought and they always, you always saw goals when it came to Matata. Just had to work. I know he said that discipline is the biggest key that he's working with the group of guys that he currently is working with.
yeah, I mean, I think if they restructure that team, that could be very entertaining and very useful as a pro development team. I think the probably the biggest success story I think I've seen is Porto's, when it comes to that. Now they've always been a well developed team, in the sense of organizational wise. But I think that taking that season off to really beef up and look for talent to go along with the organization from top to bottom, because I think that at some point there might be an academy that might be added there as well. Again, that's something, maybe a subject for another podcast, but academy structure has to be in the plans of these teams as far as a pro development. And so, as they develop, I think that teams like Portoros is going to benefit from that. Other teams already have academies that they're starting, like Atlanta City, of course, Kalanji, North Georgia's talking about it. And so these things are natural progressions, I think, that have to happen. And that's what gives these teams that feeder system that allows them to stay and crank out these players and get them to the next level. And so you're getting away from that tournament play kind of thing, buying up talent to come play and win tournaments, and you're developing from 8 years, 9 years, 10 years old and on up. It's not reinventing the wheel. That what's done in Europe, what's done in Latin America, is not done here. So
Yeah.
for the first time, really, we're starting to see that system being developed, and we're gonna do it here in Georgia as well.
Yeah. Well, that moves us on to the final topic of today, and it's actually been playing the entire time as we've been doing this podcast, and that is the week 2 schedule. You've been seeing the ticker running on the bottom. So this is the first time we, of course, we have the Labor Day holiday weekend this weekend, but this is the time, Dre, that I've ever seen. We have 6 matches and 2 matches being played at the exact same time 3 times on the weekend. It's it just kind of fell that way. So on the second at 5 o'clock, you have Kalanji Pro Profile welcoming FC Birmingham to Shiloh Stadium. And then at 5 o'clock, you have Vino Tinto Atlanta welcoming Atlanta Rovers. I believe that game is at Silverbacks.
Yeah, that's the Silverbacks.
And
And
then,
Kalanji's game, I'm gonna insert here, that may be at Silverbacks as well. There's something going on at Shiloh, I think that is a schedule conflict for them, but we'll know more about this tomorrow. But we might have back to backs there. If they do move it to Silverback, I have to put them at 2 o'clock, the Kalanji
yeah.
game. But we'll know tomorrow what's going on with that.
And then at 7 o'clock, we are going to be covering Dalton United FC versus UMA FC. This is uh, a run it back from the Community Cup that we had just a few weeks ago. That was a very entertaining match.
Great
Dalton
game.
coming out a 3-2, but that was a great match. Can't wait to see Tony for UMA again. He was just absolutely amazing in that Community Cup. Plus, also, Coach Kiko's guys in Dalton United, they are just in full season form already in the first weeks. And for me, they're just I can't see anyone else beating them until I see it on paper.
Yeah, I mean Dalton, they've always been very good, and I think it's a situation of reloading and coming out is a great start to the season, beating Kalanji, UMA. Show how solid they were in the Community Cup. They lost losing just 3-2 with largely a very much a youth team going against the champions of the Premier. So it'll be interesting to see now that both have settled in after one game, how they'll do in this match. It is at Dalton Stadium, so it's going to be
Yeah.
their advantage again. But it should be an entertainment match, just like the Community Shield was, Community
And
Cup was.
yeah, and then the second match at 7 o'clock, North Georgia United welcoming SSL to Riverbend Park.
Interesting.
That'll be an interesting match as well.
Yeah, I do want to see what North Georgia does this time. Um, I think that they had an opportunity lost through poor defending against Potros. You know, uh, and SSL is going to be well organized, but I expect North Georgia to bounce back in this coming week, and we'll see that they're going to need to if they're going to have any hope of reaching the playoffs.
And a team that always attracts a great crowd at home at Riverbend Park. That crowd helps them. Last season we covered that North Georgia LGSA match where the goals went back and forth through the whole match, and then North Georgia scoring the late minute goal to go up on top of LGSA, and that place was electric at Riverbend Park. So it should be another amazing match for them there, and we'll see what the result is. Then we turn our tables to Sunday at 3 o'clock. Atlanta City FC is going to be welcoming Los Tigres.
Well, here we are. Um, Last week I talked about that Atlanta City was going to be my surprise team that's going to make a statement this season. I thought what they did in the offseason was going to push them away from the relegation zone up into a position where they can, flirt around in the mid table and have a chance at a playoff spot. After the first week, I still feel like they can do it. And Club the Strongest is going to be a good test for them because this is a team that wants to not only make the playoffs, but win the division this season. Do they have the personnel? Do they have the team cohesiveness? We'll find out in the next few weeks. And this is the first test for them.
And it'll be the first match for Los Tigres. So we'll see what they have to offer us here in this fall season. And then the match we'll cover on Sunday, we're off to LaGrange, Georgia, yet again, Callaway Stadium. Legends FC taking on Potros FC. We'll see if Potros, if that first week was a fluke or if it is what is to come for the season. See what they can do against Legends FC.
I am glad we're doing this game because this looks like a very good matchup between two teams I think are at the same level, and both are wanting to get something out of this season. Legends, like we said before, have improved. Unfortunately, they didn't get to finish their first game, but they played really well against Atlanta Rovers. They're tied at 1-1 in that suspended game. Portros, um, to me, they ran hot and cold in that game. I thought that they finished the game really well against North Georgia, but I think that they have North Georgia to thank for some pretty shoddy defensive play in that game in the second half. But great finishing though from the Porto's starters there, and I think that I guess the player to watch for with Portoros is the player that had the brace, Pablo Gonzalez, did very well, scoring I believe scored the first two goals there. Jake Sayer also put in a fantastic goal there in the second half on a breakaway after a defensive mistake. So I think that Legends, it's a good test for Legends, but I think it's also a good test for Potros as these two teams clash there at Callaway Stadium.
It'll be fun to watch, and for those of you, like we said, we'll be covering those two matches: Dalton United, UMA, and Legends and Potros. Other matches, check a look on their socials, those teams. Maybe they will be broadcasting them. Also, if we find out that if Kalanchi is going to be postponing that match, we'll definitely let you know if they're going to change venues, whatever the case may be. We'll keep you up to all the dates and times that you need to know so that you can watch your team and their success through this fall season of the UPSL Georgia Premier Division. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us. For Andre Bomar and Larry Weaver, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Center Circle Podcast.